Hello, I'm Alfred Lambremont Webre, and we're here with Laura Magdalene Eisenhower. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you so much.
It's been a while since you've been with us at Exopolitics TV, and we're really happy that you're joining us today. And one of the things that we'd like to start out with in this kind of free-flowing conversation at the beginning of 2011, a very significant year, uh, it turns out, for everyone and for you, is uh, the issue of quantum access. Uh, you talk about how you were identified even before birth and maybe even later on through this quantum access process. And some of the people watching this may not be familiar with all of that. I wondered if you could share with us some of that information and how you felt about all of this as it was happening.
Felt, at a young age that there was just some strange attention on me, and I didn't really read into it or make sense out of it at the time. But I knew that I was on this really intense mission, and I was just handling a lot of really profound energies that just seemed to just awaken a lot of ancient memories and a lot of past lives. And it was not in a very comfortable way. It was in a very, like, oh, wow, we're at this point in history, and this is the level of imbalance that's on the planet, particularly in relationship to, the feminine energies and, how this political world just has no more real honesty or care. And all this was sort of coming at me as I felt this very dark energy everywhere. And so I was really clued into how to handle it and what I was supposed to do on esoteric levels and on more, reality levels as far as on a political, perhaps, level. And later on in life, I just, came across people that seemed to know me or hand me information about my path. And and even an interview that described my appearance and what I was dealing with and what my mission was about and how that relates to very ancient things and what I'll get into later about the state of the planet right now and what are the roots of it. And so the control forces that were upon me, when I let go and I let them take me to where they wanted to take me, that's when I started to get this sort of information that had pre-identified me. So, I was trying to just live my life and going for, this opportunity and that opportunity, still with the mission in mind that I was going to do this work. But there were some things that I was supposed to find out that sort of took me away to give me even more information. So that related to that document that I got that I'll probably talk about at some later point in my work. And also to our relationship with Andy and how your book and how I was pre-identified in Project Pegasus that he brought up in interviews before as somebody that he would be an ally within the truth movement. And then that was interesting because the Mars recruitment was based on locating me through Akashic records and remote viewing and looking glass technologies. And that's sort of how they described it. And when I was trying to figure out, why me, most of it had to be leaked to me. It wasn't something they were supposed to convince me of, this is who you are and we want to take you. It was, well, we don't want her to really know that this is the reason, and we'll just sort of maybe put a partner out there and reel her in, and then maybe, the stuff will come out. But the whole point was to lock me into this program first. And then I found out why. And it was something that I wasn't supposed to know, because when I did find out, all the equipment and anything that could have possibly picked up on this conversation had to be turned off or hidden so that I could get that information, which completely lined up with the type of path that I was already on. And to not put too much significance onto that, it does relate to just this shift that we're in.
Right. So now, so that it seems like a great deal of resources of, say, the national security state on the one hand, but on the other hand, a lot of esoteric resources in terms of ancient people and readings have been devoted to kind of pre-identifying you in this cosmic shift. how would you describe that role that they were pre-identifying you for? How would you put that in words that people can relate to, just in a very practical way?
Well, that's where it gets really complicated because as we're seeing right now, the reason I'm really just more devoted to bringing this information forth is because we're looking at our environment right now, and it's really a reflection of the feminine energy, the Gaia planet, and it's about obviously union between the masculine and feminine. But this is one force that's been very compromised. This is the one force that's been a missing link that has not been able to put its energy and information into the world to really be able to create transformation. So my role is very connected to that and how it does have ancient roots, and there is a particular level of incarnations that I've taken in order to bring about this transformation through this kind of world soul alchemy, and the roots of it are very hard for people to grasp, but when they really start to understand the myths and the story of Sophia, I somehow have a connection to that, to the point where the earthly emanation of it has a responsibility in order to awaken and illuminate a part of ourselves so that we can rise above these veils and this sort of imprisonment that we're in, that we've been manipulated away from ancient times, starting with particularly the Annunaki, who wanted to create a slave race that would be completely ignorant to what their true origins are. And throughout history, there's been, a dumbing down or a repression of the feminine force and a promotion and more attention on the Savior, the Christ, without really understanding the real story, rewriting it, and really pulling into the fabric of our culture and society what I call a false matrix that really does keep us from the truth. And it's not about me as an identity, that I'm doing by myself. It's about the unified field. It's about the transformation that we're all in, that they've identified me as being so probably devoted to that maybe I'm considered a threat or something that they would want to silence, because as I bring this information forward, it involves all of us. It involves our co-creation and the fact that unity and Christ consciousness and Sophia consciousness in union together help us break free of this demiurgic archonic system that relates to lower alien agendas and the secrecy behind the higher races.
Now, yeah. Now, just to go back again, most of our culture is familiar with the Christ story in its different formats, and it's, there's a book, The Hero with a Thousand Faces, and it kind of, that relates to the Christ archetype as it appears in many, many different cultures. Could you talk about the Sophia archetype and what that story is, and how you relate to that?
Okay. Well, what's interesting is the more, it's always been a very emotional thing as far as connecting to all of this. It's never been channeled. It's never been something that I've tried to be or live up to. I only try and live up to the best person I can possibly be, but the amount of forces that, have had attention on this have been both negative and positive, of course. And so I relate to the whole story without trying to project it onto myself. And, it's crucial that people understand this. It's as far out as it might seem, this information is out there. It really relates to the beginning, when we think of, the galactic core and the aeons and the pleroma, which are the heavens. There's this sort of mind of God and goddess that is based on essences coming from the deep, and then silence, and then truth and intellect, and all these different essences that sort of create this consciousness of God and goddess. And there was a point in that field where the Sophia feminine energy desired for all the aeons to understand the gnosis of the source of it all, of the deep. And that passion sort of stirred and got communicated to the aeon that was closest to the boundary, which was an aspect of itself, which was the Sophia wisdom. So you have the higher Sophia and the lower Sophia, but they're still sort of the same. It's kind of like saying I have a thought of happiness, but then I have a thought of peace. It's just another idea and a concept, but it was closest to the boundary. And as these forces are communicating because they're of the same mind, this passion gets stirred. But then there's this other concept that does not allow the understanding to take place because it's a mystery. And so something had to kind of take that passion and pull it in. But because it got stirred, it sort of created this imbalance. And it had to be sort of ejected outside of the pleroma, this passion to understand itself. You know how we hear in stories, the creator, looks in the mirror and tries to understand itself? Well, as far out as this is, and people have to have an open mind because we're really in trouble right now on this planet, that the source of what we're dealing with is built on essences and formations of thoughts, and even fears and sorrow. And these, when they hit the primordial sea of chaos and the void, ended up birthing all of that. So what happened was this passion gets ejected, but it's not fully, Sophia, but because she notices the disruption that happens because of it, and sees that it starts to create form, that it can't just sit outside, there's a problem. So this force of passion that wanted to know itself is unfulfilled, and as it recognizes that it's sort of locked out and can't get back in, it starts to feel fear and sorrow, and then joy, but then pain, and it can't get back in. But also its energy is there, and a piece of each other, one's inside and one's outside. So that kind of creates the higher and lower world, is what we're dealing with today. And in that place of feeling lost and bewilderment, it's the four emotions: bewilderment, fear, pain, and sorrow. That is what created the world as we know it, because the Christ figure that was in that pleroma, that was the aeonic pair, comes out and relieves her and feels pity for her because she can't get back in, even though half of herself is still there. It's kind of like this duality starts to get created. And so in her, troubles, all this stuff starts to get created, and it starts to form this other entity, which we call the demiurge. And this demiurge doesn't have the same kind of connection because it's not built upon that. It's built upon sort of inorganic feelings that aren't about, how we feel when we're in bliss and, the conditions that we would consider God and goddess, these other emotions like fear and sadness that are just sort of separate from the true self ended up creating this, and that's why it's kind of a false system, because it's not really built on the genuineness of who she really was. And so this form creates this material world, but then refuses to acknowledge where it came from, which is the mother. And so this is really how the seven heavens and the archdemons and the archangels and the reptilians and the lower races all came about. And the veil is all about not recognizing that there's a source even before that. And so the role of Sophia on Earth would be to correct this. And instead of destroying everything, which it has the power to do, it instead, gives it more form and more of its original essence from the heavens, and sends it to go on this transformative, going into the underworld and planting seeds and doing all this global alchemy, sort of, handling the assistance of the Christ energy to bring about gnosis in the people and, a shift so that we're not trapped in this demiurgic system that completely denies the mother. And we see this in culture, particularly, the Annunaki and how Marduk slayed Tiamat, and that, was the beginning of the patriarchal control. And these are the roots of the global elite and the Illuminati that we're seeing today. So when we can understand the roots, and somebody like me who's coming forward with this sort of bizarre story, where most would say, oh, but she's not on Earth, or everybody's just kind of probably has a bit of an issue with it, and what those myths are really about, and probably a lot of blame that there was even this disruption in that place, because many worlds besides this one are there. There are many higher worlds. But out of just total devotion and love, she chooses to incarnate in this very troubled place, because most of the beings here are made from her joy and the positive aspects of who she was, and the rest she feels a responsibility to transform. And, the parts that have become the archdemons that are very inorganic, that kind of feed off of people, and they're, where the dark rituals and this need to harvest power and light comes in, is something that we have the ability to stop, because when we connect to the spark, which she put in everybody, all of humanity and even the demiurge, when we start to awaken that, and we don't see things in terms of worship and faith so much, but we really see that we are a part of this, and we are a part of, the pleroma and the very origins and the true source, then we can see that this has all been this really weird illusion, and it's built out of the emotional energy and the panic of Sophia. And so, like if we're having a bad day, imagine creating a bunch of babies, that represent that weird mood that you were in. So, because it was the primordial sea of chaos and she was the generator in an aeon, coming from the originator, every thought that she had birthed life. and it got completely out of control. So as much as there are those higher worlds that she was in, co-creating and emanating, there was also this lower one that was built because a part of her being, left that creative space and then ended up falling into matter. And it was not her intention. It's not because she did anything wrong. It's not like some people think where she desired to create a baby by herself without her partner. If people really understand the story, they'll see that it was passion that never got fulfilled, that was instigated by the mind of the creator, that was tried to be subdued but couldn't be, and then got ejected and became a being that was a part of Sophia but on the outside of source energy. So that's what morphed into the planetary body, Gaia, and that's why Gaia is connected to the galactic core and capable of becoming a light body and a star, and that's what this transformation is all about right now.
So
crazy as it sounds.
Well, now they're kind of two different ways that I would like to go there, but first I want to ask, when you say that Gaia is capable of becoming a light body and a star, could you just take that to its next level? I can see Gaia becoming a light body as we move into the higher frequencies and the higher dimensional phases, and we take on our own light body stages. What does the star phase mean? Like Gaia becoming a star?
Yeah.
Does that mean an actual star like the sun, or is that more of a figurative way of speaking?
More figurative and metaphorical. When we think about, it's like the demiurge and the Sophia energy that was responsible for creating it exists sort of in the middle, as a midpoint between the high source and the earthly plane. These demons and archangels are what create the duality of like religion, where this God that doesn't see any before it, has this whole punishment and redemption scenario. But what's even ruling this planet is even worse than that, because it's this demonic energy that is just informed by these archons that are of a lower nature. And that's the duality of the demiurge, is that there's the positive and the negative, but the negative part of it, that is more Luciferian or satanic, if one might like to call it that, is ruling the power structures in the world. And the reason that it's so hard for people to awaken and to understand the real story is because it has such an influence. It runs our lives. The secrecy of the shadow government and the way that there has been agreements with these demonic lower alien races have not allowed us to really bask in the positive end of it. And because all of this was sort of done behind our back, and there's been this advanced technology that's connected to what they understand, these agreements have become, what this planetary sphere is all about and what it represents. So the star, in a sense, is that, maybe we shouldn't use star, but we have the ball, the core of the sun in the middle of the planet. Then we have the sun in the sky, we have all the planets. People have to realize that reincarnation is a gift, because we have this wheel of necessity, we have this sort of karmic journey, stemming from, the Sumerian times and Eden and all these different mythological scenarios, where we're given a chance, just as she's going through the Venus transits and, doing this type of stuff. And it doesn't have to be she, it's a unified thing. We are able to rise above this by, how we interact with the forces of positive and negative in our lives. And all these archetypes are within us. So when we start to master all these forces and connect to, these two, poles, we're doing the personal alchemy through taking lifetimes to match the consciousness of the goddess that's here to lift these veils. And in that process of transformation, the higher worlds are accessible because the veils are gone. So we're sort of all lifting them at the same time, because we have agreements with ourselves when we take bodies of what sort of scenarios we're going to live through in order to give us the wisdom to be able to truly wake up and see the difference between right and wrong. The reason the environment's getting attacked is because a lot of people used to buy into the money system. They used to buy into the whole matrix without really doubting it. It just seemed to be, well, this is our government, and they're here to help us to have order in our lives, and here's these religions, and nobody ever questioned anything until this, things had really started to become clear to people that something of a negative nature is ruling it. And as we awaken, this is the next weapon that they have, is to completely assault Gaia herself and nature, which relates to the oil spill, which relates to the fact that these HARP technologies and these gases and chemtrails are lessening our frequencies to make it even harder, because we're at the point where we're on the threshold and we're on the cusp and the tipping point to get to this next level. So this is kind of the next phase of what they're doing. So as the light body activates in our consciousness is not so ruled by matter and how our physical bodies are responding, we're able to allow ourselves to receive the frequencies from way above this. And as it does this, and as the Venus transits draw a pentagram in the sky that sort of shifts the upper and lower worlds and turns it around so the darkness goes underground, this is where the activation happens. And it's like a star, because it has the frequencies of the star system, such as the Pleiades and Sirius, and it's all a part of the DNA of the planet and of ourselves. And we've been veiled, in a sense, through these manipulations, and it's affected our DNA, and it's a microcosm of the fact that this planet is veiled.
So what really is getting us through all of this is our consciousness, and it's our ability to tune into this enlightened unity consciousness, which we can call what? Christ Sophia Consciousness? Is that an equation? Could you talk about Christ Sophia Consciousness and what it is, how to access it, and how it's going to play out over, say, this next decade? Or
so this veil is put a cloud over this, and it's an upper chakra, sort of beyond the crown. It's something that's, we're really at the bottom of emanations from source. This is a very far distant, sort of very low density place, and our chakras, hold these frequencies. So the root chakra would be what connects us to planet Earth, and our upper chakras connect us to everything above that. But there's sort of a veil where, like I said, the seven heavens, or whatever you want to use the term, seven aeonic, archonic, with the positives and negatives that do not hold. It's like even that in itself is underneath the veil. Even heaven, even the biblical heaven is underneath this veil. So when we reach a little bit higher than that and understand Sophia and the feminine and the goddess and how misunderstood that's been and how demonized it's sort of been in our culture, with whether it be the whore of Babylon, or just the role of Magdalene, or just saying, okay, well, there's these nature, earth goddesses, but what about the cosmic? What about the source? What about where it actually relates to our creator? That has been kind of kept with us, because the church is very much dominated by a masculine being. And so when we think of unity, we don't want to get rid of the masculine. This is not a competition. It's about seeing that there's actually a marriage, an alchemical marriage, where the two are together. And the dramas that are playing out that we see in our world today have to do with their reunion, as well as their reunion within our nature, on the deepest of levels and on the highest of levels. So to access it, we have to be willing to swim out of matter and release ourselves from the bondages of, addiction, depression, victimhood, and really see things as more of a dream, and then that we can access these forces even, on an earth-rooted level, because this planetary body is cosmic and multidimensional. So even though we're in this low frequency and it's very haunted, and that's still, something we can detach from. We might feel it when we're anchored and grounded. We might sense it, but at the same time, what happens up here in our higher consciousness feeds the ground below, which makes us a part of this planetary process of transformation, and not something we should wait for a savior or somebody else to do. And I say this because it's, people might think, what is she claiming? And I'm a normal person, and yes, I have a connection to these stories, and I've been on this kind of path for a really, really, really long time, but unconsciously everybody has been too. They might just not know it. Somehow we keep coming back to, deal with these dualities, and to put an end to it, we have to have this marriage. We have to honor our relationships. We have to understand the concept of sacred union. We have to be willing to step in and be the role of the mother, father, primordial blueprint. Because when we do that, it blows away, this lower being that doesn't even think that exists or doesn't want to acknowledge it. So the work's done right there. But then one has to be committed and devoted to it enough so that it can actually change the physical matter, because it moves a lot slower than spirit. And when we can hold on to that and live by it and really have that level of integrity and honesty and love and care, not saying that, it matters what type of relationships you have or how you choose to love. There's no rules. It's just having that that balance within, because we emit energy into our environment and it affects everything, and we receive at the same time. And as these two forces come together, we need to do something with it within our being, because what we end up putting back out there is going to affect the creative energy of everything. And so this is what co-creation is all about.
Right. Now, taking the issue is of a co-creation. That seems like a modality that people are going to start to get into uh, more and more, especially in this shift in terms of both protecting ourselves and in terms of creating new avenues and new envelopes for us to move into. Uh, could you talk more about the process of co-creation?
Well, it's really understanding these myths. People like John Lash, who has metahistory.org, really talks about it. And we're dealing with UFOs. We're dealing with people who are contactees who have been abducted. We're dealing with visitations from higher races, and we're also dealing with this secrecy and this incredible manipulation that just can't wait to deceive us in any way it possibly can. It feeds on our vulnerabilities. It feeds on anything it possibly can to throw us off, especially in an accelerated way between this year and 2012, December 25th. Because after that, they really don't know what's going to happen, but they certainly want to project and convince us that it's going to go this way or that way. So as we're being thrown all these externals, our work of co-creation is about understanding on an internal level and doing the inner work so that we are strong in ourselves so that we can tell the difference between deception and truth. And when we're really anchored within our own nature, and we've illuminated the spark of Sophia that's within, because she really is all of us, and she's a lot more too that people are unconscious to because of these veils, we can begin to not rely so much on what we're hearing and what we're seeing. And when we do see something that does resonate, then we can count on it a lot more because we've already done the inner work. A lot of people avoid the inner work. And it doesn't have to be terrible or difficult, but it's really taking, a step back and looking at one's life. Who are the people in your life? What are they feeding you, and what are they taking? And and it's time to clean house, and it's not about religious dogma. This is the way you have to live and be. It's just about how to ascend. I mean, ascension is a high frequency. Source energy is a high frequency. It's built on things like love and wisdom. This lower force is jealous. It doesn't feed on those things. It feeds on punishment, fear, pain, negativity, and anything that, and those are its agents and archons. And then the archangels that are from that, try and help us understand how to get to heaven, but it's still, like I said, underneath the veil. When we understand Christ Sophia, we can get one step beyond that and not deal with duality at all. Light, dark, sinning, being good. We're just free. And in that freedom, we get to really understand the primordial sea of chaos and how that's really our imagination. And in that zone, we can build our own world, and we can be one with her. And it's kind of a gift from her because basically, yes, a mistake was made on some level, but, it's still part of the consciousness of the God mind that allowed this to happen. And instead of destroying it, like I said, the gift is that we are going to be able to be on that same level. And we don't have to be. We can stay in these low densities if we want. But this is an opportunity that, the Creator has, sent beings, like myself and you and others, and I know this about you, forward to, show a hand and say, hey, there's way more than this. There's many other worlds. This planet, has it within its own nature to show us this. And nature itself does. And as abused as nature might seem, and as much as it's suffering, it also can't suffer because it's, there's an incorruptible element that comes from spirit that is free of it. And so freedom is really about being released from the pain body, from the duality, from the struggles that we deal with emotionally, and really just being in the essence that naturally doesn't have to worry about being good because it's free of all the manipulations that mess with us, that make us fall into traps that are self-destructive or destructive towards others.
Now, one of the things that we're dealing with now, in just kind of on a day-to-day basis is deception. And it seems like that's what the negative forces uses a lot. It hides behind veils. It deceives. It uses symbols. It uses masonry. It uses false flags. What can you say about deception as it's been used throughout history?
It's very old, and it's been going on for a really, really long time. And it's that competition. It's that nature that, if we know our true origins, then we're free, and they don't have any hold on us because it's superior to it. And even though they have access to it, there's a spark in them as well. They refuse to acknowledge it because they've been given a certain amount of power, because they're some of the first tribes that emanated, through this demiurgic and archonic system. So they consider themselves gods, and they do have powers, and and so because these treaties that they've made have given them use of these technologies, and they're allies now to these lower alien races, they've kind of created a very huge dilemma for themselves and the rest of this planet. And some are more than willing to be a part of it, and others are being led astray. We're dealing with a microchip world. We're dealing with mind control in the media. We're dealing with breeding programs and projects that the government has, protected by the veil of the National Security Agency, that we can't really, necessarily stop. But there is a way to stop it on a whole other level, which is what everything that I'm sharing really represents. So these deceptions are to put us in a place of weakness. So we see a false flag, we feel vulnerable, we feel scared, and who are we going to look to? We're always having to look to something to resolve it. So the more we realize that these events are particularly designed to put us in fear and in pain, because they feed on that, because there's no real, they don't have the essence of the Christ Sophia energy accessible to them. They use that. And when we start to take our power away from it and understand that this is the agenda behind it, and we start to see that the things we're seeing on TV are to sort of program us and have this us and them mentality, here's them and here's us, and they have all these riches and benefits that we don't have, and that influence us and create just our thought forms. All these deceptions are to completely distract us, and as long as they're doing that, and they have the secrecy behind our backs, they can develop these programs that will eventually, in their hopes, take over this planet, like super soldiers and cyborgs and this robotic sort of world that is controlled by these central computers, these artificial intelligence computers, and then grid technology. So yes, that's scary, but at the same time, the minute we commit to this Christ Sophia consciousness within ourselves and not worry about it in an external type of way, like we have to answer to something, we only have to answer to us, then we raise above that particular dimensional frequency, and we also, in a transformative way, counteract a lot of it and actually deactivate a lot of it, because the frequency is actually much higher. And so I've always had visions and dreams that these robots and machines would blow up. And I told you the one where I was blowing the whistle, and it was not so much as a whistleblower, but it was a song that I played, and there's always been some sort of sign to me, like the races when I was young who were preparing me for this path, that showed me the positive timeline through a viewfinder, and they said, just stay true to this. There's nothing else that's real. This is what the divine plan is. It's not the plan for us to be harmed and for us to suffer, but it's the plan that they will not abandon us. The true source will not abandon us. It's completely made out of love. And so if we just recognize that, that's really our guidance will take us the rest of the way. And that's what timelines are all about. What we choose to empower and what we choose to align ourselves to is where we end up being. And it's not going to be the same for everybody. So the deceptions are just trying to throw us off of the positive timeline that cannot be destroyed. That's always there. But transformation is a whole other thing, because that's the desire to really bring these frequencies into the lower planetary realms in order to deactivate them. But that's more of a project that doesn't have any guarantees. So there's, this particular portal that's opening up, and I call it the natural stargate. These Venus transits are allowing to happen, and that's just going to lift us out of this. And there's only a few different timelines on the positive timeline, but they all lead to something positive. It's just as we move along, and the conditions are such, because we can't predict when humanity is really going to get it. We might reach a certain point where this sort of techno world, really does take over, and we have to have those type of realizations and options in place. And my job is to gather as many of us together to understand this, because I mean, the more the better. But at the same time, the larger of the masses we can reach, the more we can actually just do it right here on this particular planetary body, and not go to the next dimension in the higher world, which is available to us. So it's while we're here, do our best to take care of this one and not go off, and if that doesn't work, there's still this ladder to the highest of heavens that is going to take us along, and that's what these myths are about. And this is not the kind of thing that you read in biblical terms. This is stuff that's tried to be they tried to destroy. They tried to destroy all the stuff that I'm telling you. They tried to destroy me. They tried to take me to Mars. And so why didn't I go? I mean, it sounded like maybe a wise thing because this planet seems to be, in major trouble. I saw right through it. That's not what my dreams were about when I was young. That's not what my nature, that's not what I'm wired to want to be a part of. Even if it was something that was protective, it was still extremely destructive because it wasn't honoring the fact that, creatively speaking, we had the ability to do this.
So we're here now, and the way through this is a global transformation, and it seems like what you're saying is that what drives the global transformation is consciousness, enlightened unity consciousness, or Christ Sophia Consciousness, or God Goddess Consciousness. Is that
right?
Is that
Absolutely, and I'm glad you said all three because names are personification. So people get lost in the names. If I'm trying to say, oh, I'm on the Sophia path, people might look at it as an identity, but it's really very transparent. It's just very much a part of the cosmic and planetary forces and the heavenly forces that are really working. It's like Annunaki who recognized that the Annunaki were wanting to create a slave race. She went into the different levels of hell to plant the seed and to be sure that this process of transformation was going to be possible, and this has been going on for lifetimes. And so the reason that this is all we need is because it's a frequency that they can't establish. It's almost foreign to them. The demiurgic energy can surrender to it and learn about its mother and be awakened in that, but that is something it neglects as long as it can fool the masses because it's power hungry and a jealous being. And it's built out of fears and emotions that were sad because they were cut off somehow. The passion wasn't fulfilled. This is such a small aspect of Sophia that got removed from the pleroma, but she pulled much more of herself out in order to do this work, to bring it to the next level in a unity co-creative way. And so, it's not just any one of us doing this. We need to do this together. And so the reason that's all we need is because it's magical and it has power. And it's a power that they used to really know about and fear. And that's why the microchips. That's why the mind control. That is why the chemtrails. Everything is to completely numb us down and stupefy us and disempower us. But, there are ways to protect ourselves. And a lot of people are coming forward with incredible ways to just, protect our bodies and our cells and our health. And, my medicine that I bring forward is the consciousness, along with others, of unity consciousness, because that alone is really, it just transforms. It transforms everything. It has done incredible things like that before. And I also had dreams of the veils being lifted and this incredible light coming into the planet and just shaking things up and doing this incredible kind of detox. And whether I had dreams or not, I see that and I feel that. So even though terrible things are happening every day, there's nothing that can really kick me out of this awareness and this devotion to this idea. It's like, it's so ingrained in me that it becomes a life or death thing. And the reason I'm sharing this is really hard as it is to articulate and for people to maybe comprehend. It is kind of life or death. I mean, I have no choice but to express it, and my physical body does not really allow me to function unless I speak this truth. So, you put me under, like sound technologies have picked up on my voice print that said, there is not one shred of BS that's coming out of her mouth. So, however I can make people feel better about what I say, I have all the proof.
now? Okay, now picking up on that, so it seems like what the consciousness is creating then is the positive timeline, and
Absolutely.
as opposed to the catastrophic timeline, which is what the assaults on Gaia, the chemtrails, the negative thinking, the HARP, beaming in the dream warfare is creating the catastrophic timeline, and the enlightened unity consciousness is creating the positive timeline, and that is creating almost like that vortal tunnel through the time-space hologram that is a positive timeline.
Right, and we have to realize, too, that matter does decay, matter does die. But at the same time, it's the force of consciousness and the power, the Shakti, whatever you want to call it, the creative force of the universe that has the ability to regenerate. So we, as much as we feel the loss of part of our physical planet completely suffering, we also have to understand that it's already in a process of decay naturally as we deal with the cycles of nature, as we have dealt with cycles of life and death for all this time. 2012 and this shift in what we're heading for is removing us from the cycle. So when we're not caught in the cycles anymore of life and death and all this duality, in order to really recognize who we are and illuminate that spark, then we're not subjected to the laws of matter anymore. And we're actually stronger than matter, and we become the creators of the physical world around us rather than it dictating to us whether we're going to be okay or not. It's a complete shift in power. We have been under this veil which has made us powerless, so everything that's happening around us, we are at the mercy of. But when this alignment happens, and unity consciousness really comes in, which it's going to, when Venus, Earth, and the Sun all line up, and these frequencies are coming in even more, it gives us, the ability to transcend the laws of matter. And even though they're trying to, dumb us down and put us in a place where we're disabled from being able to do it, the fact that the consciousness is there is where we need to focus on. And as long as we're not being controlled, we're free. It doesn't matter so much about our physical beings. It's that we don't want to sell our souls to the false side. We do not want to fall into being lured by the deceptions. And once we really harness our creative freedom and our power again, and the truth of who we are, it doesn't matter what happens to the physical because that is the positive timeline. And it'll take us everywhere that we need to be.
And along with that comes a lot of positive effects, like the activation of, quote, junk DNA, because it's consciousness that activates DNA. So therefore, we become more multidimensionally capable, and we can access more of the dimensions. So therefore, yeah.
So therefore, keep going.
So therefore, accessing another dimension is another word for saying lifting the veil, right?
Right. And even though a lot of people's DNA have been manipulated and been, we're dealing with clones, we're dealing with, a lot of genetic engineering that's been happening for, all throughout history, that's their way to have an influence in order to, sort of have an easier time controlling people. But it's still just genetics, and our soul and our spirit is way more powerful. So once we get more in touch with the soul and our spiritual essence and sacred union, it actually starts to dominate these genetics that have manipulated, the divine blueprint, but only on a superficial layer. Because what's more powerful is what always wins. The only thing that they're able to do is distract and delay. And in that delaying of the inevitable, they have, enslaved and taken in, a lot of life force that our job, my job, and those who are taking this responsibility is to help them come back and to help them break free. And so, yes, the lifting of the veils is allowing this planetary body to be in its multidimensional nature, and it's also lifting the veils off of our DNA, where 95% of it is kind of cloaked, hidden from us, and to most scientists it doesn't make sense, because most people can't make sense out of the ethereal realm, and some of it, like dark matter, and just the conditions of the galactic core, sometimes are just looked at, oh, that's a black hole, or that's this and that. A lot of times the consciousness of the cosmos and the forces of many other dimensions beyond this particular universe aren't looked at as expressions or emanations of a conscious being.
17 hours.
And it's in our planetary body, which is a conscious being. And so when Sophia morphed her energy into it, it was to protect all these different cycles of reincarnation so that she would be doing this with us. And I say, my connection to it, other people might have a strong connection to it too. When we really do wake up, we realize we've all been on this journey together. And I guess that's my point.
Right. And so do you see, in terms of this global transformation, do you see most human beings on the planet transforming, or do you see like a bifurcation, or what do you see?
Well, it's hard for inorganic entities to transform because they were really kind of like in the times of that creative energy coming out of being so fertile with fear manifesting and becoming personified as a being or a demonic force. When it's hard for it to transform, it can only really return and be integrated back into the being and transformed within something that's actually organic and of a nature of unity. And so in our unity consciousness, we actually take a lot of disembodied inorganic elements, and that light that they stole ends up coming back to us, and that's where the transformation happens. But they don't stay separate and all of a sudden wake up and get it, because they weren't given really that essence. Most were given that spark, but there's some that don't even have a soul. They're kind of they're just sort of acting on behalf of they're the agents of the archdemons, and it's like so just as much as source emanated all this stuff, each being in personification also has emanations. Like we are dealing with when one thinks of angels and one thinks of ET races, higher and lower, and the dualities of light and dark. There is no duality in unity. So the transformation brings back to ourselves the things that have fallen, in a sense. It's like when we heal and we're not having a bad day, we regather those emotions. They don't disappear from us. They regenerate and become something else. That's why we grow. That's why we evolve. When we have a hard time or we lose something or we're crying and suffering, it's not that when we're done with it, it just disappears. It actually comes back into us and we grow as a being and we become wiser, smarter, braver, tougher, and more resilient and stronger. So by the time we figure this all out and we get to the next level, we're never going to have to go through this again. We're going to be really empowered as the God-Goddess consciousness, is the source energy itself, in that, not in the part that we'll never understand that can't manifest, but in the cycle of being a part of those rays of creativity that are going to continue to create worlds, but not in this way anymore. I mean, this can never happen again. And when you think of the fact that for thousands, trillions, billions of years that the universe has even been alive, it was sort of inevitable that there would be a period in all of that this sort of creation would come about. But once it happens, it just can't be repeated.
Now, we're just starting a new year in 2011, and it looks like you're starting to move out into the world and are going to be going to different parts of North America, out to Hawaii, down to Mexico, up to Washington, down to Kentucky. I mean, all over during this coming year, reaching out to people. And that's kind of a different pattern from your, sort of a different pattern from, or at least an acceleration of your pattern. Could you talk about that a bit, or?
Yeah, no, it's really interesting because, up until I think 2008 or 9, I really didn't have any communication with anybody. And even starting at the age of like 6 or 7, when I realized, what this path was all about, I didn't get very far, socially, because this was dominating my world. I couldn't inhabit my body, and it like ruled me, and so I had to isolate myself. I had to sort of protect people from it, so they, it's just something I knew I had to handle. So, and then of course the Mars recruitment really threw me off, and many situations that were just as severe that I won't get into, were happening year after year after year. Exhaust. I mean, it's just too much to even put into words. So here we are, and it's like, I find it surreal that I'm even, taking on these projects and collaborations and really able to have a voice, because it's such a good omen, because this has been so, repressed, and this has really been thousands of years. And so when I say to people, like, God, this hasn't happened to me for thousands of years, it's like, I'm not joking. It's like there's no separation. I don't see things in terms of past lives. To me, it's one big life, one big mission. And now, here we are, 2011, and it's like, it's just, I'm euphoric in a sense, but at the same time, there's that panic of, just getting the information out, getting it out right, not being misunderstood, and just not wanting to lose anybody along the way, because this is about family, this is about unity, this is not about, there's no hierarchy here. This is about connecting the sparks and really awakening together, illuminating, and really breaking free. So there's that excitement, but then there's that frustration of, you know, all these different things still happening to throw us off, but I just don't doubt, you know, what we're capable of doing and how many people we can, you know, bring along. And we hear about these festivals of enlightenment and all these possible false flag events or things that are here to manipulate us. And I'm just really glad because the core of what we're creating together, because we're doing these conferences together too, and a lot of it has to do with Mars and a lot of our collaborations, is that this is really where truth is. And in that space, it relieves me that people do have a place to come and not be led astray.
Yeah, well, we've just about come to the end of this segment, and I'm wondering if there's a particular message that you'd like to leave people with for this time. I mean, 2011 has just started, but it looks like it's almost like a blank slate, like almost like you can write your own ticket.
Right. Well, okay, well, I would really like to encourage people to join us in June for a dolphin symposium for 5 to 6 days, where we'll really be able to awaken to our multidimensional beings and really, you know, just time travel in a sense with the dolphin energy. It's kind of pricey because it's so many days, but I think there's other ways to work around it, and I think that's a great place to all come together. But the main message outside of all of that is that, you know, there has to be diligence and there has to be devotion in order to really just harness these energies. It's about holding our center. It's about not being, you know, led astray from our center, because our creative energy is really what's bringing about this transformation. All of our creative energy counts. All of our spiritual awarenesses count. All of our power merging together is the power that's going to create this shift. So, you know, what I want to leave with people is that, you know, let's not fall into the pits that they want us to fall in, which is to turn against each other or be competitive or argue, or within the same field as being truth tellers, that we're all creating opposition and duality, when really the most important point is even beyond the information. It's about how we choose to relate to one another, because it's the frequencies that are going to create this transformation. It's the information that's going to allow us to see the lies from truth. But you put those two together, truth, frequency, love, and unity, and we don't have a problem here. So I just encourage people to really look at those things and to really watch themselves and the pollution that they emanate when they're being negative or angry, you know, in a hurtful way towards others, and to just really use oneself as a microcosm of everything, of the planet Earth, of spirit, of Christ Sophia, and to take the responsibility in their own being and not just say, okay, well, all these people are doing this work and thank God for them. It's like every single one of us counts in this process. So I just encourage people to just really step up to the plate.
Great, good. Well, we really want to thank you for joining us, and we look forward to journeying through 2011, and we look forward to your deeds and to your words. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you so much.
Certainly.